So Leo, if you want to talk a little bit about, how we do our rental due diligence, and how we determine, you can talk about rental comps and everything else and how we do that kind of due diligence on the front end.
Yeah, so for rental due diligence, I mean, I'd say the best absolute, way to figure out what your units will rent for once you're done renovating them is to actually look at what similar units close by have rented for, right? I mean, it's kind of like doing sales comps, right? The way you do a sales comp, you take a unit, you see what similar units close by to it have sold for that are in similar condition, and that's your comp. So, getting MLS statistics of actual rented units is your by far going to be the best source of data. Now, the other thing you can do is you can essentially look at active listings, right? So you'll see on here like Zillow.com. There's you got listing stats. You can even go on the websites that we didn't put on here, but you can even go on websites like apartments.com, realtor.com, all those websites, right? And you can look at active listings. Now, you have to remember these are active listings and not rented listings. So those are not necessarily quote unquote market rents, right? Because it's not like a tenant has agreed to pay that price, but it should give you another general idea of what those kinds of units should rent for. Other thing you can do, you can call listing offices or essentially talk to agents, right? I mean, there's been plenty of instances where me and Willie went into a little bit of a different pocket, into a different neighborhood. And one thing we did to confirm our numbers is we literally called up a couple of local brokers that we know work in that area and said, hey, we're going to be buying a property. We're going to renovate it, have this kind of unit, this kind of size. Do you think this kind of rent is pretty reasonable? And they would tell us yes, no, maybe. Other thing you can do if you're gonna consider going down a Section 8 path, you can look at Section 8 rent standards, or you can look at fair housing HUD rents. Basically, you can search these online. They're typically broken down by bedroom count and zip code, right? So typically each zip code will have its own set standard of rent depending on the number of bedrooms. So if that's something that you're interested in or you're thinking of doing on the back end, which me and Willie frequently do, we will use those guidelines of fair housing and local housing authorities rent guidelines to see what units can go for.
Cool. We have a question. It's actually an excellent question. How do you adjust when it's a seller's market? So easy. I guess the question. Leo and I have this conversation on a regular basis. As a matter of fact, I think we dived into it a little bit today. So when you have a seller's market, for those of you who are not familiar, a seller's market means there's little inventory. It means that there's more demand than there is supply available on the market. Typically in a seller's market, you're going to have you're going to have to do a lot more work to find find deals. But one of the benefits of a seller's market is that money is typically easy. Money in a seller's market means typically the economy is doing well, things are going well, and banks are lending. So when you find a deal, it is probably easier to get private money, to get commercial financing, to get hard money. The flip side of that, if you're in a buyer's market, you're in a little bit of a hesitant economy. The economy is struggling a little bit. There's probably more supply out there than there are buyers. There's more supply than demand. The buyers are in control because if they don't like what you're offering, they can go to the next deal. In those markets, money tends to be a little bit more difficult, but deals tend to be a little bit more available. So there are ups and downs in every market. And hopefully, Leo, if I explain that correctly, sometimes I get confused myself when going back and forth, but there is ups and downs to each side of those markets, right? In a seller's market, it might be harder to find deals. And we've been dealing with that for several years now. And I think across the country, for the most part, that's the case. Money has been easier. We might be going into what, that market may be changing. Maybe may be headed for a buyer's market soon. And deals are going to be more available and money is going to tighten up. So we've been talking about that shift for a little while now as well, where we're going to have to go out and, really sell ourselves to lenders. But there are going to be more opportunities out there in the market. So there's always that seesaw, and there's always going to be that seesaw that exists. You just have to adjust your business and where your focus is depending on which market you're in. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, and one thing I'll quickly add to that is, what a lot of people have been saying over the last 3 to 5 years is, oh, I'm just gonna wait until the market cools down, and that's when I'm gonna hop in, and that's my genius play. The issue that you don't that these people didn't account for is there's always a challenge in the market, right? The last 3 to 5 years, the challenge has been it's been insanely competitive, right? And there's not been a lot of inventory. But now, as we're kind of shifting gears with everything going on with coronavirus and all that fun stuff, right? Well, like Willie said, we're kind of seeing some money starting to not freeze up, but it's definitely starting to get a little harder to get. So if you're a rookie that didn't pull the trigger the last 5 years because you thought you're going to come in swinging once the market slowed down a little bit, the issue is you're going to have a heck of a time trying to convince a lender to lend to you, because those lenders right now only want to lend to people that have been doing deals the last 3 to 5 years, right? Because they want experience. They want people that have actually know what they're doing. They're not just going to stroke a check to someone that sat out for the last 5 years because they sat out for the last 5 years, right? They want confidence as well. So I think regardless of the market, there's always an issue, and there's always challenges to overcome.
Yeah. But master your local market. One of the reasons that Lior and I are relatively successful in what we do is because we don't try to do everything. Here in Boston, I remember there was a point where I was west of the city, north of the city, south of the city, buying all over the place. I was buying commercial, I was buying residential. I wasn't a master of my market. I changed that. And because of that, my net worth grew, my cash flow grew. I'm able to evaluate deals a lot quicker now. I mean, most of the time you can send me a price and an address and a street name, and I can tell you whether in 3 minutes whether it's a good deal or whether it's not. I probably don't need to see the property before I can put in an offer on that, because I know my market inside and out. I study the MLS. I know the players. I know the local brokers. I know the local agents. I know the streets. I know the neighborhoods. I know the side streets and the main streets and everything else. I know the local trends and what's going on in terms of commercial development and everything else. So make sure that you go in and you kind of master your market and become a what I like to call a brain surgeon, a heart surgeon, not the general MD. You really want to master your craft at the end of the day and become a specialist, not a generalist. And leads us right into our next slide. Become that specialist, not the generalist. The generalist, great if you can do everything in every market, but it's the specialists that really make money at the end of the day.